to make the waters dry and my grandson's wedding. But when the planner saw me, she whispered, "Oh, you're the one who paid for it all." They turned pale. I sat front row. "Oh, you actually came," said Monica, her tone sharp and dripping with contempt, as she stepped directly in front of me at the entrance to the ballroom hosting my grandson's wedding. The scent of roses and polished wood columns filled the air, but her words cut through like a blade. I looked at her, quiet but steady, clutching the old envelope in my hand. It had been there since morning, my dress in shambles from lack of wear, my shoes patched with tape and earnest hope. Her dismissal carried the weight of every sacrifice I had made for that family, and yet I merely smiled. "I thought it best," I said softly, not crossing the threshold until the planner appeared beside me, her face showing faint surprise and undeniable respect in a fleeting glance. "Oh, you're the one who paid for it all," she whispered, barely above a breath. Then, slightly nodding, she stepped aside and gestured toward the front row seat near the altar. "I'm sorry, ma'am. That seat, reserved. You belong there." Her hand was gentle but firm as she guided me through the sea of polished shoes and carefully pressed attire. Confusion, hesitation, even shame flickered across Monica's face. Jason's hand tightened around her arm. That gesture spoke volumes. Ownership challenged, illusion cracking. As I walked past the rows of guests, their chatter turned to whispers. Eyes darted between me and that seat at the head of the room. I felt a sudden silence, not polite, not empty, but expectant. Every head swiveled, every expression shifted. Some wore disbelief, others shame. I reached the chair, an elegant wooden seat with ivory cushions, draped in white fabric and tied with silk ribbons. I settled into it, feeling both the history of my own life and the shifting gravity of this moment. Brad, my grandson, looked on from his place at the altar, confusion clouding his features. His smile faltered, his jaw tightened. I saw the moment he understood, his heart shifting. Jason, his father, forced a polite, practiced smile, but I could see the flicker of panic in his eyes. Monica stepped back, turning rigid, as though to pretend none of this was happening. The chatter rose to murmurs. Is she supposed to be here? But she wasn't invited. That seat was for the groom's mom. And just like that, the day changed. Or maybe it had always been different, and I had just arrived at the scene that would expose it. I looked at Brad again, and he met my gaze, but not with anger or pity. Instead, I saw something searching, some internal question rising in his eyes. I did not offer words. I merely sat upright, with all the quiet dignity I could muster, and let the air fill with the weight of everything unsaid. That night, the wedding would go on, but here, in that golden-drenched foyer, something crucial shifted. The silent struggle between memory and denial had found its stage, and I had arrived to claim the spotlight, not for show, but simply for truth. __. I still remember the first time I stood with Jason on that land. It was a foggy morning just after his high school graduation. We walked past the old fence where honeysuckle grew wild, and I pointed toward the edge of the clearing. "Someday," I said, "this could be yours. A house here, a swing for the kids, maybe a vegetable garden like the one your grandpa built." Jason smiled back then, so wide-eyed, so young. "For real, Grandma?" I nodded. "It will be my wedding gift to you when the time comes." He never forgot that promise, and neither did I. That plot of land on the outskirts of Nashville had been in our family since 1956. It was not big, but it was peaceful, a whisper of everything we once were. My late husband, Earl, had poured the cement for the mailbox with his bare hands. Every corner of that land held a memory, but I was ready to let it go because I believed in Jason. I believed that if anyone could carry the soul of our family forward, it would be him. When he met Monica, I welcomed her with open arms. I helped with the engagement party. I stitched her bridal handkerchief. I even offered to co-sign their loan for the wedding venue, but they declined, insisting they had found another way. They were modern, independent. They said crypto was the future. I didn't understand it. Digital coins that did not exist in your hand, markets that rose and fell in seconds. Jason and Monica spoke in a language I did not know, but I stayed silent, letting them lead their lives. Until the night, the phone rang. I was in the kitchen, heating water for tea, when the hospital called. Monica had collapsed from a panic attack. Jason had lost almost everything. The down payment for their condo, the wedding savings, even Monica's emergency fund were gone in one bad trade. Their account was frozen. Jason was being investigated for using borrowed assets. I could feel the tremble in the nurse's voice as she said, "They may lose their place to live, ma'am." I put down the kettle and sat in the dark for a long time. Then I made my decision. The next morning I called my lawyer. We agreed to sell the land quietly, just enough to cover the immediate hospital costs, pay off the condo lien, and ensure the wedding could proceed without embarrassment. I asked for my name to remain off all records. "Let it look like it came from nowhere," I said. "I don't need credit. I just need him safe." It took only 3 weeks to finalize the sale. I did not attend the closing. I sent my lawyer in my place. When I handed over the last set of keys, I whispered to the empty air, "Earl, this is for our boy. Let it be enough." The wedding happened just as they'd dreamed, grand, glittering, a display of everything they believed they had built. No one knew that behind the linen tablecloths and designer florals was a grandmother's empty hands. And it might have stayed that way if not for the envelope Jason found. It was a standard letter from the escrow company confirming that the land deed had been transferred and funds disbursed. I had forgotten to update the forwarding address. He showed up at my door the next night. He held the letter like it was fire. "You sold it," he said, no greeting. "The land, you sold my land." I opened my mouth, but he didn't let me speak. "You broke your word. That land was mine. You said it was my future. What else have you lied about, Grandma? Huh? Did you enjoy this, making me beg for help only to find out you went behind my back?" "I did it for you," I said softly, "to protect you." "I never asked for protection. I asked for trust." The words hit me harder than a slap. He left before I could explain more. After that, the exile began. Monica changed the locks on their house. They told my grandson Brad that I had manipulated the family. My phone calls went unanswered. The birthday cards I sent to Brad came back unopened. I was removed from their Christmas list, their group photos, even their family tree on Facebook. But I never stopped hoping. I never responded with anger. I didn't contest their narrative. I believed that silence was not weakness. It was dignity, and I would hold on to that, even as they erased me from their lives. Every week, I walked past the edge of the neighborhood where my land once stood. A new construction crew had moved in, building something modern and soulless. I would stand at the fence, hands folded in front of me, whispering a prayer not for vengeance, but for clarity. I thought love would be enough, but sometimes people only see the price of things once they realize what they have cost. I stood at the edge of the aisle, heart pounding as the wedding music began to swell. I had come so close to turning away after what happened with the land, the betrayal, the exile. I thought maybe I finally understood where I belonged. In silence. At home. With the memories that never judged me. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the whisper of the planner when I arrived. The flicker of recognition in her eyes. I took a deep breath and walked forward, past the rows of chairs with stiff backs and stiff guests, until she gently took my arm. "It's time," she said when we reached the front. Her voice was soft, but there was an undeniable authority in it. She guided me through the white drapes to a seat in the front row, where I belonged, not just in reputation, but in reality. The seat had been prepared, ribbons undisturbed, and when I sat, I could feel the hush ripple through the crowd, like the sudden pause in a symphony when a note is held too long. I looked down the aisle. Jason stood beside his bride, glowing. But when he saw me, his expression wavered, confusion washing over him before he forced a polite half-smile. Monica, elegant in white, looked stiff, her eyes flickering with alarm. I clutched the program in my hands and whispered, "Thank you," to the planner. She nodded, her gaze steady. Later, when the officiant called everyone to attention, I caught a moment when Monica leaned close to the planner and whispered, "What is she doing here? And why is she sitting in the front row?" The planner paused just long enough for me to meet her eyes across the sea of white chairs, and she repeated in that same quiet tone, "She paid for it all." The words seemed to echo. Someone gasped. A man next to me turned his head. The bride's florist looked momentarily betrayed, and Jason's jaw locked. He took a shuddering breath. I leaned closer to Brad, my grandson standing beside me. His eyes were quiet pools of shock and remorse. He grabbed my hand under the table, his grip small but real. I squeezed back, safe in that moment. When the ceremony began, I watched, but I was not merely a spectator. My presence had shifted the room, not with applause, but with a dawning clarity. The guests' whispers turned to confusion. I could hear fragments behind me. Wait, she paid? For everything? But she wasn't invited. What's going on with them? Jason tried to smile again, but it strained something deep inside him. He cleared his throat when his cue came, but the words sounded brittle. Monica bit her lip, glancing at him, then at the guests. Her hands trembled on the bouquet. I sat still, tears sliding down before I could stop them. By then, Brad had turned to his wife and whispered something too low for anyone but me to catch. Her eyes softened, and she squeezed my shoulder. In the dim light, I felt the truth ripple outward. I had been written out of their picture, hastily erased from their story, but here I was, front row, undeniable, unforgettable. My sacrifice lived in ribbons and floral arches, in servers' trays, and the hidden credits to the vendors named Anonymous Donor. My heart both ached and soared. Betrayal had run deep, but love, even when ignored, can be rediscovered in the eyes of a child, in the gesture of a planner who whispered justice in the hush. When the ceremony closed and we stood to clap, I met Jason's eyes for just a moment longer. He looked away, and I knew that wounds had been drawn, but not yet healed. I stood as well, beside Brad, the flowers of the venue bending with applause, and I thought, this story is not over. Not until the ones who shunned me learn what loyalty looks like. I was still reeling from the hush I had caused when a tall event staffer made her way to the front row. In her hand was a small USB drive, labeled in careful handwriting, "Play if someone calls her a freeloader." The room had just begun to realign, but the air shivered with new tension as she dropped it into the planner's palm. The planner nodded, pale, then motioned me to stay seated. With a single gesture, she summoned the audiovisual technician. Moments later, the soft glow of the projector screen flickered on. A white canvas behind the altar transformed into a stage for a deeper truth. The video began. It opened with an intimate scene from inside Jason's home office. Jason and Monica sat across from each other at a polished oak desk draped with bills and legal forms. Jason's voice was low, urgent. "We can sell the house. That land was promised, but they won't know in time. A slip, a MRSA hospital stay, she's frail. We'll get the proceeds and nobody can question it. By then, we'll already have what I need for the crypto margin." Monica nodded, repeating softly, "And the wedding funds, you said they came from savings. We can say the money was from inheritance. It will be natural. They'll never check." The tone wasn't malicious, it was calculated. Cold. I felt the floor tilt under me as the implication sank in. The projector flickered to the next clip. Jason dialing numbers, whispering, "Yes, the meds, they arrived. Don't worry, it will look like routine post-op pain management, no suspicion." My chest tightened. Monica's face appeared on screen, her wedding makeup smeared with guilt. "We'll manage the charity angle later. Something like elder abuse prevention. That way no one asks why Grandma bought those flowers with that money." The auditorium caught its breath. I sat motionless, eyes locked on the screen, feeling the betrayal like shards of glass in my bones. No one moved. Then I heard it, the crack of Brad's knees collapsing. I turned to see my grandson fall into his knees beside me, tears streaming, his body shaking with silent sobs. The magnitude of what he had just seen swallowed him. The screen darkened. Silence hollowed the room, deeper than before. I wiped my eyes, tightening my grip on Brad's arm, willing him to hear me. The truth had unfolded in low resolution, but it burned brighter than any spotlight. I did not say anything, because sometimes silence speaks as clearly as accusation. From the back rows, I could see the gasp in the florist's eyes, the recognition in the caterer's posture, the horror dawning in the wedding photographers who had been paid for the celebration. Jason stood stunned, mouth open, trying to process the tableau before him. His betrayal laid bare. Monica's face turned pale. Her hand flew to her mouth like a shield, as though she could block the truth. Brad looked at me, voice broken. "Why? Why would they want to hurt you, Grandma? I swallowed. I knelt beside him, brushing the tears from his cheek, because some people fear what love can't buy. Behind me, I felt movement as planners and ushers ushered workers into action. The pastor stood frozen mid-sermon. Chairs rustled, guests shifted in their seats, uncertain. The music track that had been playing softly faded out. No one rewound or restarted it. I stood with Brad, holding his trembling hand. His chest heaved with the force of emotional collapse. The audience watched us, their eyes softening, turning. Empathy was a wave washing over the place. I turned and faced Jason, voice steady. You wanted a house, I gave you one. You wanted peace, I gave it to you. But you wanted me gone. That you had to plan it, that's your choice. He didn't respond. He couldn't. Brad found his voice at last, loud and quivering. I can't let her go through this alone, Dad! And just like that, he stood and stepped between me and Jason. The room exhaled as one, and I knew the tipping point had passed. The darkness that had cast me out was now exposed in the harsh light of truth. Underscore. I held the armrest of my chair, heart pounding as the last frames of betrayal faded from the screen. The auditorium remained suspended in silence, an ocean of witnesses caught between grief and shock. I reached into my purse and felt the familiar crinkle of a small envelope. It was yellowed at the edges, the handwriting shaky, my handwriting, addressed to Brad. I opened it with trembling fingers and read quietly, knowing every eye was on me. My dearest Brad, I miss you every afternoon, how your voice used to echo through the house when you were young. You are the only one I wanted to protect. I'm sorry I couldn't be there soon enough. But I love you with every piece of me, with all my heart, Grandma. I looked up at him. There were tears in his eyes before he could even see my face. His breath hitched. I knew then that I had shown him more than any wedding speech ever could. My sacrifices hadn't been invisible to him after all. Brad stood up, voice trembling but loud, so loud the microphones caught his words, spreading through the crowd. Mom, Dad, you told me Grandma didn't drive to the store because she was slow. You told me she was a burden. You erased her from our lives. He turned toward Jason. Desperation and pain swelled in his voice. But here's the truth. She showed up for me when no one else did. She loved me when you didn't give her a chance. And she gave more than you ever could imagine. Monica's glass of champagne trembled in her hand. She raised her eyebrows in shock before her lips curled into a bitter, mocking smile. Oh, how touching, she hissed. Come save Grandma, honey. Maybe she'll sing you a song, too. Her voice cracked, and laughter fluttered out, sharp, humiliating. The guests recoiled. The air thickened with shame. Jason's face glowed red, equal parts anger, embarrassment, confusion. Brad ignored her laughter. He walked around the chairs, climbing the step onto the altar. He took my hands and spoke directly to everyone there. This is my grandmother. She made everything in this room possible. She sold something she promised me to protect us, my parents, my future wedding, me, and not one of you even knew. There was a palpable shift in the room. Eyes widened, tears glistened behind lenses and contacts. Some guests raised cameras, others began murmurs of apology. The pastor cleared his throat. The music stopped altogether. Brad's voice caught when he turned to Monica and Jason both. Grandma deserves dignity, not pity, not erasure. And then he said softly, I love you, Grandma. I leaned forward and hugged his cheek, burying my face in the sleeve of my dress. There were no words big enough for a moment like that. But the truth we shared, hearing it aloud, unlocked something inside all of us. One elderly guest, a woman with silver hair, stood and clapped. A ripple of applause followed. Soon hands were rising in ovation. It was not celebration. It was recognition. Jason's shoulders sagged. He looked small. Monica pressed her lips together, and I thought I saw regret, an echo of the mother she might have been if she had chosen compassion instead of cruelty. I stood, brushing tears from my eyes, gathering myself. I looked at Brad, and he exhaled a shaky breath. Then he motioned for me to come forward, to stand at his side. I rose, and together we walked down the aisle. As we passed guests, I saw embarrassment in some eyes, relief in others, guilt in many. At the front, Brad hugged me from behind while I sat. I patted his arm. The plan to erase me had failed. Instead, my truth had drawn a circle of solidarity around me. I heard someone whisper, "She wasn't a burden, she was the story." And Brad, raised voice steady now, spoke, "Yes, that's exactly who she is. They could have silenced me. They tried." But the words from a grandmother's heart had found a home in her grandson's soul and echoed louder than any betrayal. Underscore. Just when I thought the storm had passed, the doors of the hall creaked open again. Two figures stepped inside, a civil investigator in uniform and a sharply dressed man carrying a leather briefcase. My lawyer. Every whisper died instantly. The officer walked straight to the front, his voice firm and clear. "We have received formal notice of potential financial abuse of an elder involving unlawful asset transfers. Based on corroborating video evidence and sworn testimony, we are moving to halt all activity involving the disputed estate until further investigation." Jason's mouth opened like a caught fish. Monica gripped his arm, her face colorless. My lawyer raised a thick folder and addressed the room with calm precision. "This folder confirms that asset transfers occurred under coercion and misrepresentation. Under elder justice law, those are not just immoral, they are illegal." Gasps erupted. A few guests looked toward me with guilt. Others simply turned to gawk at Jason and Monica, now frozen in place. The officer turned again. "Mr. Jason Austin and Mrs. Monica Austin, by request of legal counsel and under civil authority, you are asked to vacate the premises. This action reflects not only personal justice, but also broader protections under federal elder justice laws designed to shield seniors from financial exploitation and coercion. These laws, embodied in statutes like the Elder Justice Act and reinforced by recent enforcement efforts, recognize that older adults are often targeted by those they trust. They authorize legal intervention, restitution of misused assets, and penalties for those who exploit elders. This was not only my victory, it was a triumph for elder rights everywhere. You are not under arrest at this time, but you will be contacted for formal questioning." Someone behind me whispered, "Is this really happening?" Yes, it was. As Jason stepped back, shaken and silent, Monica's voice cracked. "This is your doing. You planted all this. You're a manipulative old—" "Enough," the officer cut in. As they were escorted out, all I could feel was an overwhelming silence. Not victory, not anger, just silence that filled the cracks of decades spent swallowing pain. Then Brad, my sweet grandson, stood up beside me. His hands were trembling as he took the microphone from the planner. "I don't know what to say," he began, eyes sweeping across the stunned guests, "except I owe this woman, my grandmother, everything. I was lied to, manipulated, shielded from the truth." He turned to look at me directly. "Grandma saved us. I'm the one who was lost." A single clap came from the far corner, then another. Then the whole room stood and applauded, not as a performance, but as a reckoning. For every silent dinner I ate alone, every birthday missed because I was too embarrassing, every insult cloaked as concern, this was the answer. Not in rage, but in truth. Not in punishment, but in consequence. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, "You're not invisible anymore." And for the first time in years, I believed it. I stayed seated, my hand pressed over my heart, as the hush following Brad's declaration settled over the hall like a sacred pause. Then, footsteps approached again, this time not of the enforcers, but of my granddaughter's school principal, a local lawyer, and a representative from a medical foundation. The foundation representative stepped forward and gently cleared his throat. "With support from community donors and inspired by the courage of Mrs. Ellie Watson tonight, our board has decided to establish a new endowed scholarship fund for medical students committed to serving underserved communities. The fund will bear her name, the Ellie Watson Community Medicine Scholarship." A ripple of soft gasps swept through the guests. I pressed a hand to my lips, speechless, as the weight of both my pain and my legacy collapsed inside me, only to be carried upward by the gravity of that moment. Jason's jaw fell, Monica's face flushed a shade darker. Brad stood taller, holding my hand with quiet pride. Then the local judge, who had been observing from the side, walked down the aisle to the front with purpose. In measured tones, she addressed the room. "By unanimous decision, and in light of the evidence presented tonight, All remaining assets misappropriated or withheld from Mrs. Watson are hereby forfeited to the newly formed Scholarship Trust. Further, Mr. Jason Austin will be facing charges under the state's elder financial exploitation statutes. He is subject to fines, civil restitution, and possible criminal penalties. A collective intake of breath followed. I saw families clutch each other. Some wept quietly, and then even more quietly applause began again, this time not hesitant, but wholehearted. The judge continued, "Furthermore, due to violating the best interests standard as a guardian, Ms. Monica Austin's parental rights are hereby suspended. Legal guardianship of her child, Brad Watson, is transferred to Mrs. Ellie Watson." Again the room went silent, and then erupted in gentle applause. Brad looked at me, eyes shimmering with tears. I gathered myself, leaned down, and whispered, You've got me now, always." He nodded as if sealed by that promise. I stood and moved forward, the crowd parting with palpable respect. I could feel the weight of 1,000 judgments dissolve under the light of what had been restored. Truth, justice, love. The foundation director handed me a small plaque. "This honors your sacrifice and names you as the founding benefactor of the scholarship legacy." My hands trembled when I touched the plaque. I thought of the secret sales, the quiet help, the forgiveness, and here it was, transmuted into something cherished, not hidden. Brad stepped ahead of me, carrying the plaque as though it were a torch, his face steady. He raised it for all to see and spoke. "My grandma didn't just save our home, she saved us. And now she'll light the path for dozens more to serve healing in the world." Uproarious applause followed, gentle, cheering, a wave of solidarity. I watched as Jason and Monica were helped out through a side door. No one chased them, no one jeered. They left under the weight of their choices. Brad led me toward the exit later, and I whispered to him, "Tonight, I lost nothing but shame, and I gained everything else." He looked at me, his voice both tender and firm. "We'll rebuild this family. With truth. With you leading." I leaned against the cool doorway, the promise of night settling in, and felt, for the first time in decades, that I belonged. __. The ribbon, stretched across the gate, felt impossibly thin under my fingers, a delicate thread tying the past and the future together. I stood in the center of what was once an empty lot, the same patch of land I'd sold in secret to protect my family. Now it glowed with life, rose bushes in every shade of pink, cream, and blush, winding around a low stone pavilion. A small crowd gathered, neighbors, students from the new scholarship program, community leaders, even a few of the wedding guests, smiling with quiet admiration. Brad, young but resolute, stood at my side with scissors in hand. He looked radiant in his suit, and in his gaze I saw gratitude, respect, and love. I placed a hand gently on his arm as he cut the ribbon. The gate swung open, and a warm breeze followed us inside. Fluorescent petals drifted into the shade of the arbor. The roses smelled of grace and rebirth, as if the earth itself was forgiving me for what was taken. Brad turned to me, his voice softly echoing across the garden. "I believed lies, Grandma. I thought I lost everything when I believed them. You showed me roots, even when you had none left." I felt tears press behind my eyes. He had grown so much. Strong, kind, brave. I squeezed his shoulder and whispered, "Thank you. You gave me wings tonight." The community center building behind us, the converted house, had been renovated into a place of healing and hope. A sign above the door now read, "Watson Community Haven, Elders and Young Mothers United." Volunteers bustled inside, setting out refreshments for the closing ceremony. The mayor stepped forward on a small terrace. "Tonight we celebrate not only a ribbon being cut, but a cycle restored. This garden, this center, and the scholarship fund bear testament to one woman's love, the legacy of Ellie Watson." As he spoke, I noticed older neighbors marveling at the beds of flowers and young mothers gently supporting their children, grateful for this safe space. Each smile, each reverent touch of a rose thorn felt like proof. Life grows easiest where love remains. Banjo music started quietly, something soft and hopeful. Brad offered me his arm, and we strolled beneath the rose-covered pergola. Petals brushed my cheek, pink laughter on my skin. Before guests dispersed, Brad paused in front of me, young, steady. You rescued me from forgetting what mattered. Now I'll carry this forward, with care, with honor, with you. I nodded against the rose-scented breeze and felt a hand brush mine. It was the principal from the scholarship board, offering a small framed photo of the first group of recipients, gathered by the center in bright scrubs, smiling at me. Pride, humility, justice, framed in a single snapshot. I pressed my palm to the cool, lantern-lit stone bench beneath the garden arch. Late sunlight scattered in blooms above, petals trembling with golden light. I whispered to the roses, those I planted with hope, those that survived silence. They shut the door on me, but you opened the gate. I leaned back, breath easing, heart finding its rhythm again. The past had threatened to uproot me, but here I was, among blossoms and children's laughter, surrounded by truth made visible. I was not an echo. I was blooming, and so was everyone I loved. I never thought I would feel this kind of joy again. Every morning now begins with the tiny murmurs of new life. A year has passed since the garden bloomed, since truth found its voice and justice wove itself into our world. And now my arms cradle the future. When Brad called me early this morning, he practically danced through the phone. "Grandma, you need to get here now." So I hurried, my steps slow but eager, to the new family home they'd built just a few blocks from the center I helped establish. Every rose petal I pass on the walkway reminds me of the soil we reclaimed together. The door opened with the softest creak. I stepped inside, and there they were, Brad's wife, Ellie, sitting in a rocking chair by the window. In her arms, my new grandchildren, twins, wrapped snug and warm, their faces still relaxed in sleep. Colors seemed brighter. The hush in the room was different now, gentle, filled with possibility. Ellie smiled as soon as she saw me, exhaustion mingling with radiant pride. She reached out the babies to me. I gasped, but softly, letting my heart rise in my throat as I took their tiny arms. One was a boy, dark-haired, eyes scrunched in dreams. The other, a girl, fooled me with lashes that fluttered when I kissed her cheek. As I held them, everything else faded. I felt the soft pulse of their hearts, the perfect warmth of new life. It echoed in my own, stirring feelings I thought I had left behind. In a single moment, time felt like a gift given to both ends of a long bridge, my own dawn and their dawn. They were chirping now, tiny voices forming syllables I might learn someday. I carried them to the window, to the view where roses and sunlight intertwined. Ellie came beside me, her eyes wet. She whispered, "They're here because of you, Grandma, because of your strength. They already know love through your name." I nodded, trying to speak but finding only tears and breath. They pointed tiny fingers at the garden, beyond the glass. I followed, our garden, our legacy. The day unfolded like a gentle prayer. Ellie fixed me tea, and we laughed over how identical the twins looked when they napped together, like reflections in a stream. Brad slipped in later, quieter, watching us with a smile so tender my chest ached. That afternoon we took the babies outside. Brad nudged me. "Hold them, Grandma. Let yourself feel young again." He helped me stand, and I cradled them in my arms, both of them. One in each arm. Grass brushed my shoes. The sun glowed over us, gentle and forgiving. In that moment, I felt roots and wings at once. I thought of all the pain of the past year, how I sold that land, how I sat in public shame, how justice was carved out by proving love over deceit. But none of that mattered now, because I was being carried by these small lives I was still discovering. Brad wrapped a rose garland around my grandmother's hat and laughed. "I made you a queen, Grandma." They were growing mouths that would learn to say apple and grandma. Already they held our future gulp by gulp. That evening, we shared dinner. Storybooks lay open beside high chairs, forks clinked gently. Ellie served mashed sweet potato. Brad hummed to one twin, feeding her with bare patience. The garden lights shimmered through the window. I looked at them and breathed deeply. Who knew feeling old could someday be softer than fear? Ellie caught my gaze, and we both exhaled together. Before I slept, I sat on my own porch, the house in the center glowing behind me, baby clothes drying in the breeze, the scent of roses trailing through the screen door. I thought of every ache I carried here, the laughter I lost, the tears I couldn't cry, the truth I had to find in gallery silence, and I whispered to the night, in carrying them, I was carried. You shut the door on me, but look, together we opened all of them. Stars nodded above, and I understood. Healing is sharper than pain. Love doesn't fade. It folds into every generation. Even when roots are cut, the new blossoms still rise. Underscore as the roses swayed under the sunset, and laughter echoed from the garden Brad once thought would never exist. Ellie leaned back on the porch, arms wrapped around the newest members of her family. The journey had not been easy. She had walked through silence, betrayal, and invisibility. But in the end, truth found its way to bloom. Ellie Watson's story reminds us that sometimes the people we push aside are the very roots we need to stand tall. Her resilience, her quiet sacrifices, and her unwavering love didn't just restore one family. They built something greater, a center for healing, a scholarship for future doctors, a legacy that would live far beyond one wedding or one injustice. And if this story moved you, if it made you remember your own grandmother or wonder what you'd do for someone you love, then don't let it end here. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories. We bring you real, powerful narratives of grandmothers from around the world, stories of strength, betrayal, sacrifice, humor, heartbreak, and most importantly, justice. Every week we share a new story that honors the forgotten heroines of our families, women who gave up everything for others, sometimes unseen, often unthanked, but never unimportant. When you subscribe, you're not just joining a channel. You're becoming part of a movement to celebrate elder voices, to protect their dignity, and to amplify the stories they were once told to keep quiet. So click that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you never miss a story that might just change the way you see your own family. Share this episode with someone who needs to remember what real love looks like. And always remember, every wrinkle has a story. Every silence holds a secret, and every grandmother is a legend waiting to be heard. This is Grandma True Stories, and this was Ellie's story. Until next time, love fiercely, forgive wisely, and never underestimate the quiet ones.